Today, cable television advertising. It's affordable and it's effective.
This is CNN.
From Washington, Crossfire. On the left, Mike Kinsley. On the right, Mona Charen. Tonight, does America work? In the Crossfire, Chuck Colson, co-author of Why America Doesn't Work. And in Boston, Joseph Nye, director of the Center for International Affairs at Harvard University.
Good evening. Welcome to Crossfire. American workers are lazy and illiterate. They produce defective products. America these days is merely Japan's subcontractor. Who says so? The Speaker of the Japanese Parliament, Yoshio Sakarochi. He apologized Tuesday for these rude remarks over the weekend, but America is still smarting. Yesterday, Los Angeles County canceled an order for 41 rapid transit cars from a Japanese company. Reason? The county decided it should buy American. Buy American is the theme of gloomy ads that have been running on American television stations.
Since 1980, over 500,000 Americans who make clothing and home fashions have lost their jobs. So if you think looking for the Made in the USA label doesn't matter,
Next.
it matters.
But some Americans worry that the Japanese speaker's remarks carry the sting of truth. With its anemic economy, its soaring national debt, its failed education system, its crumbling infrastructure, is America a civilization in decline? Or is that just a recession-induced snit and America's greatest days are still ahead? Mona?
Mr. Colson, in your book, you say that American workers are lazy and apathetic and that our products are shoddy. That puts you in the America in Decline school. So I want to ask you, what is the country in the world that has the greatest productivity and is the world's biggest exporter?
Well, we're tied with the Japanese right now as the largest exporter in the world.
No, the answer is the United States.
26%, both countries. But the problem is we used to be 27%, we're now down to 20. Excuse me. We used to be 27, we're now down to 20. The Japanese used to be 6, they're up to 20.
That we export more products to the world than any other nation in the world. That's the fact.
But our share of the market share has been declining dramatically. And last year, Mona, actual real earnings fell. The standard of living for Americans alone among the 7 great industrial nations of the world declined.
Well,
now, I don't agree with the Japanese speaker, but I think we should have paid him to say what he said because it'll probably make us go out, work harder, and prove he's wrong. But there's a kernel of truth. I think he's putting the blame on the wrong place. There's a kernel of truth. All the evidence indicates, whether you look at education, the number of people on welfare, as we talk about in our book, the number of people in prisons who have no jobs. I mean, we are paying people to be idle, and we aren't as productive as we were. Real earnings are declining.
Joe Nye, isn't it pathetic that the taxpayers of Los Angeles, instead of getting the best rail cars for their money, are picking their rail cars on the basis of where they're made because they don't want to buy Japanese cars? Doesn't that reflect a level of national insecurity that does suggest a nation that has having plenty of self-doubts if it's not actually in decline?
Sure, we're having plenty of self-doubts, but there's nothing new about that. You know, in the early days of the American Republic, the Founding Fathers worried about decline. We worried about decline in 1958 after the Russians put up Sputnik, and look at where the Russians are now. We are a country that was always having self-doubts. You look at the underlying facts, we're not doing that badly. Our share of world product, which went down after World War II because it's been artificially high from the war, but our share of world product since 1975 has stayed the same. It's the same level it was before World War II, about 23% of the total. That's not decline. That's basically holding our own.
All right, but just to clear up one statistic that Mona used, when she says Americans are still the most productive people in the world, productivity, it is true. Productivity means how much we produce per capita. That's simply another way of saying we're the richest country in the world per person. But the trends are all against us in that respect, aren't they?
Why are we getting?
Trends are not relevant.
Why are we getting beaten in every single market? And you look at what.
Well, that's
really,
not true. We're not beaten in every single market.
What really
if you look at aircraft, if you look at computers, if you look at pharmaceuticals, if you look at chemicals,
agriculture,
you'll find that I'm just taking manufacturing, find the Americans are at the top. The fact of the matter is productivity in manufacturing in the United States increased by 3.5% a year in the 1980s, which is at the top of the tables for the rich countries. Well, we're not being beaten across the board.
The Brock Commission found that our productivity rate of increase had been steadily declining through the 80s, and you just have to look at the products where we're head-on with the Japanese and you'll see. You go out and buy a television set, go out and buy a computer.
if you take
Mr. Colson, aren't you really, though, comparing apples and oranges? The fact is that the United States, after World War II, which is the period of time that everyone always chooses to compare us with now, at that time, our European and Japanese, currently allies, were flat on their backs after the Second World War. We were the only industrial nation left standing. And of course, we dominated the world. Now they've caught up somewhat, and yes, at a faster rate, but that's what you would expect because they started from such a low position.
Well, I think that obviously there's truth in that, but you know, what we're proving here is that statistics can prove anything that you want to prove by them. I think the evidence is that in the 80s we tripled the national debt in this country. I think we have seen where the workers are asked whether they're working as hard as they used to. 63% say no. 75% say their products that they're making are shoddy. We have stripped the work ethic from American life.
I'd like to ask Mr. Nye a question to follow up on this, because Mr. Nye, doesn't Chuck Colson have a point? As part of this Sumitomo contract, the company was prepared to spend 1/3 of its $38 million for policing the rail transit in Los Angeles, just for policing its trains. That's 1/3 of the cost. Doesn't that tend to support Mr. Colson's theory that we are in decline in some respects?
Well, we have problems in this country. It'd be foolish to deny them. But, you know, if you compare what's bad in the present with what was good in the past, you can always show decline. But suppose you compare the good in the present with the good in the past, or vice versa. We had some terrible problems in the past. If you look at the problems of race, of crime, look at American cities in the 19th century. It's not a linear decline. There are some things that are better, some things that are worse. But the danger is if we let ourselves get so wrapped around the axle on this thing that we do foolish things. What we needed to do is to raise our savings rate and improve public education,
All right, stop
and we
right
can
there.
restore
I
ourselves.
want to ask you on that very point. Isn't it, Japan has a higher savings rate than we do. They have a higher investment rate.
Right.
Given what we know about economics, isn't it a mathematical certainty that if those trends continue, if they continue to save at as a much higher rate than we are, and they do this for very long, it's mathematically inevitable that they are going to become more prosperous than us if they aren't already?
If they invest more than we do productively, at some point in the next century, they will pass us in terms of their absolute standard of living. They're not there yet. We haven't declined to the point that we can't recover. Basically, you're right. If you take two curves, you can prove that they'll intersect. Remember, that's what Khrushchev said when he came to the United States in 1958, when the Soviet growth rates were higher than the U.S. We will bury you by the 1980s.
Yes,
worked out just the other way.
Do we have any evidence that we had very good reason to suppose that the communist economic system didn't work? Do we have any similar comforting evidence available about the Japanese economic system, that eventually it will slow down and allow us to pass it?
The Japanese economic system does very well in some areas. For example, manufacturing, some parts of manufacturing. In services, they're terrible. If you look at agriculture, it's highly protected and very inefficient. You know, the Japanese themselves say that they're a poor people in a rich country. The actual standard of living of Japanese is much lower than the United States, it's a quarter lower. So in that sense, the Japanese have a lot of reforms they have to make in their economy before they reach our standards.
Isn't that true, Mr. Colson? Don't people like Michael tend to see the Japanese as 10 feet tall when, in fact, they live on a tiny percentage of their country, which is only the size of California?
Lots of things wrong with the Japanese economy. But, you know, I used to be in politics, and I kind of go by, I think the American people have a very good sense of what is happening. There is a malaise in the country right now because people do not think this country is headed in the right direction. Basically, the problem that they see when they look at 13 million women on welfare today, they see a large percentage of this population that is put back into slavery. Then they see people in prison who aren't working and costing us a fortune, and they see the crime rate rising dramatically in the country, and they say something is wrong in the heart and the spirit of the country. And the consumer confidence polls show this, the public opinion polls show this, the workers themselves who have no confidence in their management. Something radical has to happen. It's a values crisis. And we can talk about economic statistics and comparisons with the Japanese all night long. Fundamentally, in the 60s, we went through a cultural revolution in this country. We took away the meaning of work, and people today do not work as hard as they did in the past. They're the first to tell you they didn't, because work is no longer a good thing to do. It's no longer part of the Puritan work ethic where you do it to the glory of God. It is something you do purely utilitarian to get a paycheck. You only go around this way once, grab for all the gusto while you can. We've stripped the meaning out of it. Until we get that back, we're going to lose.
Let's Professor Nye, and then we have to take a break. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you look at Dan Yankeliewicz's polls, what he showed is that the work ethic in the United States is stronger than most other countries. So there's a great exaggeration here.
Oh, no, Yankeliewicz's polls are the ones I cite in my book, which shows the tremendous decline and the loss. Yankeliewicz's is the one who showed that the workers had lost confidence in their own management in staggering numbers. His study in 1982 was absolutely a precursor of what happened in the 80s.
Why don't we stop? Because I want to ask Professor Nye about that very question about if the problem isn't really American management, not American workers, when we come back.
Crossfire is brought to you by GE. From plastics to financial services, we bring good things to life.
He was 50 when it happened. In 3 months, he went from perfect vision to almost total blindness.
You know, you never appreciate the beauty in your life until you can't see it anymore. My wife, my family, my life. Everything I cared about just turned to darkness. And no one could tell me why.
In test after test, doctors were at a loss.
I can't find a thing.
There seemed to be no answers. Finally, a test was done using GE's revolutionary magnetic resonance imager. It lets doctors see things that ordinary tests and x-rays can't. Look at this. Incredible. The doctors discovered a tumor affecting his optic nerves, and he was treated. Within days, he got his vision back.
Hey, how about a smile?
And everything that came with it.
Things do go bump in the night. There are boogeymen. Fortunately, Sealy's exclusive posturepedic sleep system is designed to support everyone differently. More comfortably. To keep your night from becoming your worst nightmare. For a better night's sleep, better sleep on a Sealy.
One show this year offers a different look at politics. Get voting records, not just rhetoric. Get analysis, not just information. And understand the process. Inside Politics 92 premieres Monday, 4:30 Eastern on CNN.
Welcome back to Crossfire. Is America in decline? We're debating that heavy subject with Chuck Colson, co-author of a new book, Why America Doesn't Work. You might remember Mr. Colson as special counsel to President Richard Nixon, a job that led to some jail time and ultimately to his founding of the Prison Fellowship Ministries, of which he remains chairman. And joining us from Boston is Joseph Nye, professor of international relations at Harvard. He's the author of Bound to Lead, The Changing Nature of American Power. That book takes a more reassuring view on the decline question. Joe Nye, I want to take up this point that the Japanese have a lower standard of living than we do here in America, and of course that's true. But it's slightly misleading, isn't it, for a couple of reasons. First of all, their standard of living has been improving a lot faster than ours. And second of all, their standard of living is lower because they save so much for future investment. Doesn't that complicate this reassuring idea that they're not living as well as we are?
Well, if you take a Japanese salary and an American salary and you translate it into market baskets of what will it buy, food, size of your house, cars, entertainment, and so forth, you'll find that on that technical terms called purchasing power parities, that the Japanese are about a quarter worse off than Americans. And
but given the fact that they were devastated, they had nothing just 45 years ago, that's a remarkable achievement.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, let's not detract from what the Japanese have accomplished. They've done a lot of good things, and frankly, we can learn some things from them. For example, if you look at the Japanese technologies in manufacturing, we've learned some of this just-in-time inventory practice. We should learn more about greater equality between top managerial salaries and workers' salaries, which I think is something that we don't do as well as they do. If you take a company like Ford and Mazda, Ford owns a part of Mazda. Ford now produces a truck that's good enough that Mazda puts its label on it, and that's because Ford learned a lot of these techniques from Mazda. So it's not all a one-way traffic.
Mr. Colson, we can all agree, can we, that the Japanese do some good things. They have, of course, some politicians who put their foot in their mouths with regularity, as do we.
Right.
But aren't we losing sight of American strengths? And aren't you really a part of this? I mean, we can agree that the United States faces enormous social problems, the decline of the family, crime, welfare, and all of those things. At the same time, this is still the country that passes the Gates test.
Mona,
if you lift
I'm
the gates, people want to flow in, right?
Ex-Marine captain, love my country, flag-waving, red-blooded conservative all of my life. And I believe in this country and love this country, and that's why Jack Eckert, who's a hard-headed businessman, and I wrote this book, because while it is a book that decries what is wrong, it also says what we need to do to begin to teach some values in the family, to begin to get, I mean, schools ought not to be places we send people for therapy. There ought to be places we send people for achievement and learning. And we got to end the welfare scandal, and we got to get some corporate democracy
Let me
back.
sum up what you're saying. You're saying that what's wrong with America is liberalism, right?
What's wrong with America is paternalism, a little bit too much affluence, and certainly too much affluence in the boardroom suites. I mean, what we got to do with these, Lee Iacocca's got to get out of the boardroom and go down and walk on the floor.
Right.
And
let me ask you a question about that. Aren't these auto executives really, though, giving a wrong impression about American industry in general?
Absolutely.
I mean, we don't make terrific cars anymore, but we make wonderful products of various other kinds, medical equipment, enormous numbers of other things. And yet, because we're trying to push our poor cars down the throats of the reluctant Japanese, we're giving the impression that our whole economy is in the toilet, and that isn't true, right?
If we can't sell our cars to American citizens, how do we expect to sell them to Japanese citizens?
Too much agreement going on here. I got to get Joe and I back into this.
No, but I want to be sure that you understand on this book, we're giving some really good ideas about what American businessmen are doing. There are companies, good companies, like ServiceMaster. We use them as an example in the book, like what Jack Eckert did in his own company, where he'd go out and spend 50% of his time on the floor with his workers. Now, that's how we can start to get it back in America, and that's what we need to do.
Joe and I have to add a little note of agreement. I agree with you that things are not that bad, that our problems are not that great, and could be reversed with a small amount of effort. But in a way, when I get depressed about the future of this country, that's one of the things that depresses me. I think if it would just take such a small transfer from what we spend to what we save, it would just take such a little bit of working harder, and we can't get anyone to do it, and we can't find political leaders who will persuade people to make this very small leap. It really suggests that we Americans have lost our gumption, doesn't it? I mean, that, in a way, the small gap we have to jump is more depressing than a bigger one.
Well, you know, President Bush said in his inaugural address that the Americans have the will but not the wallet. In fact, it's about the other way around. The United States spends less of its money on taxes than any other rich country, about 31% of our GNP. The European average is around 40%. Our problem is that we have the wallet, but not the will to do anything about it.
Let me ask you something. I think that Mike may be wrong about this, because if you look around the country right now, what you see is states like New Jersey, where they are passing a new welfare reform proposal that will not pay women to have more and more babies. The other states are doing similar things. Doesn't that suggest that we are seeing the error of our ways?
Well, I think there's been a change just in the last 6 or 8 months. People are being asked what their values are. 10% of the people, 10% more, say that they're searching for something more in life than just pleasure. I mean, there's been a subtle shift, and that always happens in downtimes. Happened in the 30s when the crime rate went down. We forget that crime often comes as a result of affluence, people having too much, not people not having enough. So maybe through these hard times we're going to learn to work together, to get a sense of community, to get a sense of caring. I disagree completely on the tax.
Well, it's not very hard, is it, Joe Nye, for a political leader to say, I want everyone to stand tough and cut welfare benefits, whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. Leadership, it seems to me, is leading people where they don't want to go, telling people that you yourself, the typical voter, have to do something you might not rather do.
What we're doing.
Whether that be pay more taxes, or whether that be cut your own middle-class entitlements. And I don't hear politicians of either party saying that to the voters.
If you look back at what happened in the 1980s, we gave ourselves a tax cut and put up spending at the same time, and we met the difference by borrowing money from abroad. The net result of that is that while we saved about 8% of our GNP net in the 1970s, we save about 4% today. There's a missing 3% of our product, which has gone from savings and investment into current consumption. That's the truth of the matter. That's the choice we face. We're just not willing to pay for what we want to spend. We've got to get rid of the government debt.
But isn't that a values problem?
We're going to have to go to a break. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the one area where no country can touch the United States of America.
Hello, I'm Bernard Shaw in Washington. President Bush says stay tuned. When asked if he will negotiate another extension of jobless benefits, we'll have details. Also, an emergency airlift is readied for the former Soviet republics. And prosecutors rest their case in the trial of a woman accused in serial killings. Join us for Prime News after Crossfire.
Imagine your refrigerator with bigger door shelves for bigger bottles, with leftovers left in quick-serve trays for leftover space, more space, nearly 27 cubic feet, and a door in the door for things you use more. Imagine GE's Space Center 27.
I hate to break it to you, John, but it's going to be a big one this time. I'll give you a minute. Tough break. His first major repair, and it comes just 2 months after his manufacturer's warranty ran out. Worst part is he could have avoided this bill by signing up for Geico's mechanical breakdown insurance back when he bought his new car, or any time before it hit 11,000 miles. I suppose people think all extended warranties are too expensive, but with Geico, you get longer coverage than many car dealers' extended warranties at savings of 30 to 50%. You can even choose between 2 coverage plans for the same low price. And you can still see your favorite mechanic. So take a word of friendly advice. Call Geico today.
For longer coverage at savings of 30 to 50%, it's mechanical breakdown insurance from Geico. Sign up within 11 months or 11,000 miles of purchasing your new car or light truck. Call now for free information.
What can I tell you, John? You should have had the coverage.
Where would the movies be without cable? A monthly subscription to basic cable gives you over 600 movies for less than it costs a family of 4 to go to the movies once. Cable contributes to life.
Mr. Colson, the one area where no other country can touch us is in self-criticism. This country loves to wallow in what's wrong with us and why we're inferior. Isn't that part of the problem? Isn't the poor mouthing, even that we're doing on this show, making things worse?
Oh, it's one of the wonderful, glorious disadvantages of democracy, that we can beat ourselves.
But is it just democracy? I mean, you don't find this in France.
Oh, I think you find this in most America. Oh, go look at the tabloids. Go look at the tabloids in Britain. My goodness,
I've spent some time.
No, I think this is a very healthy thing because we're able to analyze ourselves and look at our problems. And I'm an optimist. I mean, Larry King asked me on television, I'm an optimist, pessimist. Both. I see us in some tough economic times, but those tough economic times are going to make us better and stronger. And there's some principles we can apply that will pull us out.
Okay, Professor Nye, you know, it's often said you can take comfort, well, whatever we're doing economically, we're still the militarily strongest country in the world. In fact, we are now the only superpower. How much comfort should we take in that? Isn't it, once again, historically inevitable, looking at other great powers, that if you lose your economic superiority to other countries, you cannot sustain your military superiority indefinitely?
Well, if your military costs keep eating away your domestic base, that'll bring on decline. The interesting thing, though, is for the United States, it's been going the other direction. We spent about 10% of our GNP on the military at the height of the Cold War. We spend about 5% today, and it's going down to about 3%.
But
so the trends there in the right direction.
But is it possible that if Japan were to continue on its economic trend, and we're continue on ours, and that does not reverse, and Japan becomes clearly the economic leader, Germany becomes economically stronger, that America will retain its military and diplomatic superiority?
They've got half our population.
Just let him answer.
Yeah, I think you'll find that the American military presence is actually a good investment for the United States, as well as not harming our economy. There's a lot of mythology here, but basically the fact is that the United States is the one country in the world that, in a sense, sells insurance policies. The Second Russian Revolution is not over yet. There is a degree of uncertainty. Both the Japanese and the Germans want us there.
All right, well, we're selling insurance policies. The question is, how much are we charging for them? Thanks a lot, Professor Knott. Thank you, Mr. Colson. Good luck with the book.
Thank you, Michael.
Mona and I will be back after a couple of minutes of further decline.
It's Grand Central Station. It's Carnegie Hall. It's a late-night bistro and a banquet hall for 50. It's a GE Monogram kitchen. With GE Monogram appliances of such dramatic beauty and original style, they have no equal. So with Monogram appliances, your kitchen can be everything you ever dreamed it could be. Because you may call it a kitchen, but at GE, we know it's really your living room.
Mariel, you're amazing.
Oh, JP, stop it.
No, really, you get to play so many people, yet you're always you.
Well, I do get a lot of help from a terrific hairstylist I trust.
We all know how important that is.
The thing I love is he doesn't make me just look good for the moment. He really takes care of my hair.
I'll bet I know how he does that.
Yes, of course. He only uses Paul Mitchell products, just like I do at home.
Well, I won't argue with that, but I will say this.
Yes, JP?
I still think you're amazing.
Paul Mitchell products are guaranteed only when purchased in fine salons.
Something's waiting inside the powerful 486 SX computer. A technology that will make it even more powerful. We call it Room for the Future. Introducing built-in upgradability. Check into it. From Intel, the computer inside.
Tonight, new information on the Cuban Missile Crisis from former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara. Plus, has the William Kennedy Smith trial hurt rape victims? Hear about it tonight on Larry King Live, 9 Eastern on CNN.
Mona, you don't seriously think, do you, that the way to preserve American greatness is to bury our heads in the sand and pretend that the problems we have don't exist?
No, of course not, but I think there's a tendency to see the Japanese, for example, as 10 feet tall. One of the things we didn't talk about tonight is that 1/3 of the houses in Japan don't even have indoor plumbing. Those are hardly the giants who are going to take us over, as you've been saying.
They are the achievements of the Japanese. In the past 45 years, they have built their society up from scratch to a level where if it's not equal to ours yet, it's almost equal to ours. The trends are all in their direction, not in ours. I think it can be easily reversed, but it takes more will among our leaders and among our citizens, too, than I have seen.
I don't think you know how to change the trends, Michael.
All right. From the left, I'm Mike Kinsley. Good night for Crossfire. And from the right,
I'm
Mona
Charen. Sorry. Join us again for another edition of Crossfire.
And Prime News is next. Here's Bernard Shaw with a look at the headlines. Bernie?
Thank you, Michael. As Congress considers another extension of jobless benefits, the White House indicates the president will go along. Shuttle astronauts perform stomach-churning feats, all in the name of science. And an airlift of international aid is prepared for the former Soviet Union. Those stories and more next on Prime News.
Coming up, Prime News, followed by Larry King Live after a word from your local cable system here on CNN.
Direct from Broadway and the heart of rock and roll comes Buddy, the Buddy Holly story, the sensational hit musical that's raising the roof in London, Australia, and now in theaters across America. The star that had him cheering, the songs that had him bopping, the story that went down in history. Come down for the wildest night out since 1959.
Live at the Des Moines Civic Center for 3 performances only, February 4th through 6th. Call and charge your tickets today.
I bought a new Pontiac Bonneville because I saved over $3,000. Compare Pontiac's low 2.9 APR to a conventional finance rate, and you'll save money, just like me. I was excited about Bonneville's great styling and features, and even more excited about saving over $3,000. Hurry, if you don't buy a Bonneville before February 4th, these savings will disappear.
See your Golden Circle Pontiac dealer.
In 1939, America was going back to work and working up a healthy appetite. To satisfy that appetite, Country Kitchen was serving plenty of great-tasting food. the same as they do today.
Come in for our winter white sale. We've got lots of good food at low white sale prices, like cake and eggs, only $1.99.
Now, if we could just find a way to get away from work.
Yesterday and today, country kitchen.
If you're as old as this car, have we got a deal for you? You see, when you insure your car with shelter insurance, you may qualify for preferred rates for those 48 and over. With the Platinum Shield, you'll get the same personal service you've come to expect.